Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've brought us some fascinating sources today looking at, well, one of the trickiest parts of conservation.
That's right. We're talking about when people deliberately get close to animals that could, frankly, bite, sting, or cause serious harm.
Yeah, the ethics of being sort of a guest in a potentially dangerous home. It's a really loaded interaction.
Mm.
It is. And our main source, Close Encounters, Ethics of the Bite and the Sting, it really sets out our mission for this deep dive. We need to dissect that ethical challenge, the one facing divers, researchers, conservationists.
Okay. And find those key elements that define the ethical line, that thin line between genuine curiosity, professional curiosity, and actually causing harm or disturbance.
And looking through the material, what really jumped out at me was the range of animals. It's not just, the big obvious predators we might think of first.
No, not at all.
Source flags up sharks, sure, but also things like jellyfish, almost invisible threats sometimes, and then jackals, seals, venomous snakes, stingrays.
Exactly. It shows the challenge is broader than maybe people assume.
It seems the potential for a bad outcome, that's the common thread, not necessarily the animal's size or reputation.
And that scope is really important because it pushes us towards a more universal standard, ethically speaking. The sources argue that, look, whether you're watching a jackal from a distance needing absolute silence or managing proximity to a shark underwater, which requires totally different skills, the core ethical thinking, it should be consistent.
We should.
Minimize your impact. Maximize good, accurate observation. That's the goal.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit. You mentioned ethical thinking. The source talks about ethical distance. How do we actually define that? It's got to be more than just, don't get hurt.
Oh, absolutely. Much more. The calculation, if you want to call it that, it puts welfare and data integrity first. Safety is critical, obviously, but it often flows from getting the other parts right.
Okay, so welfare and data first.
Right. And this ethical boundary, it's defined by, well, two really crucial things you can actually track. The first one is a deep, really ingrained understanding of animal warning behavior.
And that's more than just general knowledge, I assume.
Way more. It's about reading the subtle stuff, the microsignals, knowing when that animal is starting to feel pressured or stressed by your presence.
Okay, can we make that more concrete? What does reading those warnings actually look like? Say, for some of these different animals mentioned, sharks, for example.
Okay, sharks. A professional, someone who really knows them, has to spot the difference between, say, just natural curiosity and a genuine pre-attack signal.
Which might look like.
Well, the sources point to things like a swimming pattern that suddenly becomes really exaggerated, almost stiff, or maybe the pectoral fins drop noticeably, or even just a sudden sharp change in direction. That can indicate anxiety because you're too close.
Ah, I see. So even if you're technically meters away, if the shark shows those signs, you've already crossed that ethical line.
Precisely. You've become a disturbance. The animal is telling you, I'm uncomfortable with you here.
And that applies on land, too.
Right.
What about, say, a jackal or a seal? The signals must be different.
They are, but the principle's the same. For land animals, it's often about territory and sound. A jackal might give off these very subtle alarm calls or start doing quick, repeated head turns that tells you you're likely in their active space, maybe their hunting ground.
Okay.
With seals, especially near pups, the warning could be much more obvious, like a loud, really aggressive bark, maybe even a short charge that stops just before it reaches you.
Wow.
The point is, if the animal is reacting to you, your observation is already compromised. Ethically, you've breached that distance. Okay, that makes sense. That brings us to the second part of this ethical calculus, which feels maybe trickier for the person involved. Setting clear personal risk limits. How do people balance wanting that amazing close-up data or photo or whatever with the real danger involved? Yeah, that's tough. It demands a really honest self-assessment of your skills, your preparation, the specific environment you're in.
So knowing your limits.
Exactly. Ethical interaction means knowing your physical limits, yes, but also your psychological ones. The moment someone thinks they can truly control an interaction with, say, a highly venomous snake, well, they probably crossed an internal risk boundary.
Right, because you can't really control it.
The ethical question shifts from, can I get a bit closer, to, is my presence going to force this animal into a defensive action? Recognizing that danger isn't weakness, it's actually fundamental professional respect. So it boils down to this. The ideal isn't just proximity, it's almost invisibility. If the animal knows you're there and changes what it's doing because of you, the ethical mission's kind of failed. You've got it. And this is where it gets even more complicated, because human emotions crash into the picture.
When we talk about animals that bite or sting, we tend to swing between two poles, right? Fear
Hmm.
and the opposite, almost. This hunt for a thrill. Okay, let's tackle fear first. It seems necessary to some extent. Like, it helps maintain that ethical distance we just talked about.
It does. Healthy caution is vital.
But the sources warn about
Mm.
when that caution turns into something else. Outright demonization. Where's that line?
That tipping point, I think, is when the narrative shifts from respect of this animal's power and space to we need to eliminate this threat. Fear is helpful when it drives good safety protocols, mandatory distances, proper equipment.
Okay.
But it harms conservation efforts massively when it fuels that monster story. The idea that these animals are inherently malicious.
And that narrative can lead to real-world consequences, right? Like
Yeah.
pressure to cull or remove animals.
Absolutely. It can lead to policy pressure for eradication or removal every time there's even a non-lethal encounter near humans, if we only focus on the bite or the sting.
We lose sight of their role in the ecosystem.
Exactly. And it completely undermines the work conservationists do, often risking a lot, to actually study and protect these species.
It's not subtle, the impact of that kind of fear-mongering.
Yeah.
No, the sources are clear. Fear, especially when used politically, is a powerful weapon against sound conservation policy. Public pressure, driven by fear, demands actions that often end up destabilizing the very ecosystems we should be protecting. So fear is one dangerous extreme. What about the other end? You mentioned the thrill-seeking, the adrenaline rush. This feels very modern, especially with social media.
It is. It's a huge pressure point. The source material spends quite a bit of time analyzing what it calls the thrill problem.
Yeah, thrill problem. Okay. And the core of it is this. Often, the most dramatic, high-risk footage gets the most attention online, the most views, the most likes, which creates an incentive.
A really problematic incentive structure, one that can directly encourage actions that violate animal welfare, purely for the sake of getting that wow shot.
How specifically does chasing that shot compromise welfare? It's not just about getting a little too close, is it?
No, often it's far worse. We're talking about active manipulation, deliberate disturbance. The sources list some pretty grim examples.
Like what?
Things like using excessive bait to make sharks behave aggressively, maybe in a confined space where they feel trapped, or cornering animals like seals or jackals, cutting off their escape routes just to get a better camera angle.
Wow.
Or, with snakes, even physically handling or provoking them simply to film that defensive strike, that dramatic moment.
So the spectacle just completely overrides the ethics. You could have a video go viral, millions of views, maybe making money,
Yeah.
but behind it is a total failure of respect for the animal.
Yes. The human involved prioritized the image, the content, over the animal's basic right to not be harassed or stressed.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If a video looks spectacular because the animal is reacting aggressively towards the person,
That reaction itself is almost certainly a bright red flag. It's a sign that the ethical distance wasn't just breached, it was probably stomped all over. That aggression usually isn't natural curiosity, it's a forced defense. Okay, that leads us directly into the next logical question. If chasing viral fame and spreading fear are both so damaging, how do the experts, the people who do respect these boundaries, effectively communicate this to the rest of us? How do we educate the public?
yeah, that's arguably the toughest piece of the puzzle. The core challenge for public education, according to the sources, is striking this really careful balance.
Which is?
Teaching respect for animals that bite or sting, acknowledging the danger but doing it without demonizing them. We have to be honest. Yes, a venomous snake is potentially lethal. That's a fact.
Right, you can't downplay the risk.
No. But at the same time, we have to champion their intrinsic value, their role in the ecosystem.
It's about separating the risk from any sense of, malice or intent. A great white shark is dangerous, yes, but it's not evil. Its defenses are biological functions, not moral choices. Precisely. And the sources strongly suggest focusing education on the animal's role. Talk about why jellyfish matter in the marine food web. Explain what jackals do for population control. Shift the focus from just the sting or the bite mechanics
To their place in the bigger picture.
Yes, that helps shift public perception away from just predator or threat towards participant in the ecosystem.
So the message becomes less watch out danger and more like respect the role, maintain your distance, because if you push too hard, defensive actions are inevitable.
That's a much more constructive framing, and it's crucial for long-term conservation. Because if we only focus on the threat, public opinion often demands drastic action removal, culling whenever there's an encounter. Good education is the antidote to panic.
It feels like ethical close encounters demand this constant dual awareness.
Hmm.
You need to be intensely aware of the animal's defensive power
Mm-hmm.
while being absolutely committed to not forcing them to use it. The responsibility is always on the observer, the human, to manage that interaction safely and ethically.
Always. It's never the animal's fault. And if you connect this back to that initial idea of the ethical calculus, the professional who really understands, say, that stiff swimming pattern in a shark, or hears that specific jackal alarm call,
Yeah.
they're not only keeping themselves safer, they're also gathering better, cleaner data that actually supports the case for that species value, because it reflects natural behavior, not stress reactions.
That makes perfect sense. It all ties together.
Ultimately, looking closely at these encounters forces everyone involved, whether you're a researcher or just a tourist, to grapple with a really fundamental tension.
Which is?
How do we maintain that profound respect, that ethical distance we've been talking about, while still encouraging the scientific curiosity and the public engagement that we need to drive conservation? Especially for species that are dangerous, yes, but also ecologically vital.
And that brings us right back to that thrill problem, the viral content issue. If chasing clicks and views, which often seems to require pushing ethical limits, is a major driver of welfare problems, well, what does that say about us, the audience?
It's a challenging question.
What responsibility do you, listening now, bear when you watch, like, and share that kind of dramatic content? Could demanding content that clearly respects ethical boundaries actually change the incentives for creators?
Maybe if the market shifts.
Perhaps the breaches would decrease too. It puts some of the onus back on collective demand, doesn't it? Something to definitely think about next time you see one of those super dramatic high-stakes animal close-ups in your feed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex ethics of the bite and the sting. We'll see you next time.